Yes, welcome back to the Magic Sponge Podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien. I'm the guy behind all the NRL Physio content you see on socials. My co-host, James, you are here on a Sunday night. Mate, it is a good day to be on the Magic Sponge Pod. We have two winning teams. The Bronx, look, mate, I'll tell you now, I didn't tip them, and I didn't tip them halfway through the game. I don't know where they pulled that one from, just a Kev masterstroke. And the Finns today, just really never in doubt, led from start to finish, just a typical Finns game where there was no heart-in-mouth moments. It's just a good weekend to be a Finns and a Bronx fan.
Mate, it is good. There's also the add-on there for the NRLW, who also had a huge win against the Titans, which was absolutely out of nowhere. So I was a little bit sad going into the weekend thinking, geez, we might get absolutely put on toast here. But the Broncos have gone big in the men's and the women's there. So happy days from that respect. And to your point, Brian, I'm always going to get buried in my Broncos kit. I'll go to my grave like that. But I was certainly questioning my ability to wear that out and about with the weeks leading up to it. But now I'm back on the bandwagon.
I love it, mate. It's I think today being a Finns fan was, they've just gotten to the point where they remind me a little bit of the Raiders. They're kind of going down that Raiders path where it's like no matter what the lead is, either way, where if they're behind by 20 or they're up by 20 with 20 to go, it's still going to be coming down to the wire. It's fun to watch sometimes, other times not so much. It was just good to win one because I think they've lost a lot. And, mate, friend of the show, Sean O'Sullivan with a 42-meter hoof. I gave him Buckley's chance of getting that over Buckley's. And good to see Jermaine Asako play well after his ankle injury last week, which was good. Shout out Jermaine Asako owners out there. I'm sure if anybody played him, it was very, very good. Look, guys, as always, we're on YouTube. Please head on over there, subscribe, review, thumbs up, all those wonderful YouTube things that get us in front of more eyeballs. It's always much appreciated. This is your one-stop shop for all things injury analysis in the NRL. We cover in-game injuries, review the big injury and rehab news from the week. We loop it all back to recovery time, on-field performance, and SuperCoach and Fantasy scoring. If you get value out of this content, head to patreon.com/NRL Physio. That's where all your stuff is. All right, mate, let's get straight into it. The injury wrap from round 23 brought to you by Pain Pod, drug-free pain relief anyone can use.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I mean, I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Let's wrap up the injuries from round 23, Brian. So to kick things off, we're going to do HIAs. Jordan Rapana, Jeremiah Nanai, and Mark Nicholls headline this week. Do you want to speak to any of those players in more detail?
Mate, I think Jordan Rapana, Ricky Stewart came out after the game and said he doesn't expect to have Jordan Rapana for next week, which was exactly what he said about Morgan Smithies last week. I'm not going to get through this segment without talking about Morgan Smithies. Sorry, James. I just have to take it back there just briefly because that is I think it's the most controversial concussion slash HIA situation I've seen in a long time, and just nothing. There was nothing. There was no. Like I know Canberra out of New South Wales and those kind of things, but we had like wall to wall coverage of Reece Walsh after Origin 1. Like, is he going to play 3 weeks later from this concussion where he was knocked out? And we've got Morgan Smithies. Yeah, who just didn't look fantastic. And I think like everyone, I was so shocked to hear that it wasn't a category 1, I guess ruling. And then, challenging the 11-day stand down just blows me away. And not a peep, I think, from any of the mainstream media. I know like there are a few podcasts out there that seem to mention it, which was great to see and sort of raising that awareness. But I know Reece Walsh Origin, it's the biggest game. I get that. But yeah, it's just frustrating sometimes because I'm like, there's a lot of blow up a lot of the time for little things here and there, depending on who the player is. But I'm like, this is one of those situations where it doesn't matter if it's Morgan Smithies or whoever it is. Like that was yeah, it was really, really controversial. And yeah, we just didn't hear much about it. I think you and I were talking off air, and it goes to how subjective this whole process is at the moment, where the sooner we get those objective tests, those saliva tests, those blood tests, those eye tests that can, categorically diagnose whether a player has suffered a concussion or not, we're going to be left with things like this. Because, yeah, I think with these guys, most of them, I think it's 98% now. It was 99.5%, but it's now 98% of players who suffer a concussion will miss the next week, since the 11-day stand down has been brought in. But with 2 this week, with Smithies and Dylan Walker both playing, knocks that percentage down a little bit. But yeah, most of these guys should miss the week. Sorry for the rant, mate. But yeah, that Morgan Smithies one, I just still can't get over it.
Yeah, it's not a problem, Brian. I think it's a fairly good point to raise because certainly when he got named on Tuesday team list, my eyebrows were way up on the top of my forehead there. So how that's eventuated and how it's come to be, it's a good question, but it's certainly not a consistent thing at the moment. Like you said, it's very subjective. We'll move forward. So Rabbitohs versus Storm, no injuries out of this one to speak of. Titans v Sharks, we've got Teig Wilton ruled out pre-game with a hamstring injury. Beau Fermor from the Titans ruled out with a bruised kidney pre-game. And Brian Kelly with illness out of this one. Any other details you want to add on?
Yeah, Teig Wilton, just hamstring tightness is what the Sharks have said. So you'd probably only expect a week for him, or, maximum 2. But I think had a few people asking about Sifa Talakai. Yeah, it's not going to be like a 4 to 6 week thing. And for Talakai to have good value there. Beau Fermor with the bruised kidney. This is one that wasn't, no one sort of reported out of last week's game. It's come out during the week. Yeah, I think the biggest thing I just wanted to say about internal organ injuries is it's not that the Titans are hopeful to have him back next week or the week after, but as soon as you start dealing with medical issues like this, like it's not a musculoskeletal injury anymore where it's like, let's do a scan. Yeah, there's grade 1 strain of the hamstring. You're talking about your kidneys. As soon as you're talking about medical things like that, yeah, it can just be a little bit more unpredictable. So hopefully back next week or the week after. But when you've got blood in your urine, which you possibly do with a bruised kidney, it's not something you want to rush back very quickly. And then, yeah, Brian Kelly, just worth mentioning. AJ Brimson played center because Brian Kelly was ill.
That is a good point. That's a good one to raise. Move on to the next game. So Eels versus Panthers. This was a game that had me almost in the midst of a PTSD flashback as a Broncos fan getting run down in that grand final, Brian. So for all the Para fans listening, I completely understand how you feel during this one because I felt exactly the same things as of October last year, and it was brutal to watch, I would say. So yeah, rough one for the Eels because they were very good. I can't believe how good they've been in the last few weeks, honestly, Para, with the guys who got missing, but they've been really strong. Ryan Matterson with a chest or rib concern here. Scotty Sorensen from the Panthers with a hamstring injury, and Liam Henry with illness out of here. Brian, I guess most fantasy relevance. Nato or Scott Sorensen are probably much of a muchness at the moment. They're not highly owned players, are they? But they have been sneaky useful.
Yeah, I think Sorrow especially was a little sneaky point of difference for quite a few people. I certainly had quite a few questions about him a couple of weeks ago because I think he it might have even been last week or the week before. He kind of got folded over under Nathan Cleary and played limited minutes. We kind of mentioned it. So there's obviously some owners out there, and whether it be draft or classic, look, the big thing here is 2-week return to play at minimum, usually for this kind of thing, especially because the Panthers are usually pretty conservative at this time of year with bringing guys back. So you'd think, I mean, what are we now? Around 23, so probably around 25 at the earliest for a return, and potentially, 26 or 27 if they play it safe with him. So, yeah, he is someone who, unless you've got mega, other issues or you have no trades left, I would be moving on from him. Matto with the chest/ribs, there wasn't a clear mechanism with that. Hence, I still haven't posted about it. He looked like he was clutching pretty high up on the chest. pardon me, looked like he was clutching pretty high up on the chest. So, yeah, you're thinking like sternum, ribs, that kind of thing. So possibly pain tolerance. He said post-match he should be okay. So, yeah, hopefully won't be an extended one for him either.
Good update there, Brian. We'll move on to the Raiders versus Manly game. No injuries out of this one, but pretty good game of footy there for the Manly Seagulls, and good to see Tommy Turbo back doing Tommy Turbo things, Brian. Following this game was the Cowboys v Broncos, and again, like we said earlier, what a wild old game this was. No injuries out of this one to report either, but Brian, question to you, why is Katoni Staggs not fantasy relevant when you see him play games of footy like that? What are we missing there? Why does Katoni not rip in fantasy? It's this question I have year in, year out with him. It's a bizarre one, isn't it?
Well, mate, I was in the Patreon group chat, and we were talking sort of midway through the first half, and I was going, I think there was one of the tries where it went over, the Bronx didn't even contest it, went over their heads. And I kind of said, like if this continues, Kevy can't keep his job. Like this is just getting ridiculous. But they turned it around, and it was mostly off the back of Katoni. So, mate, I think I've got to throw to you as the Bronx fan, where do they capture that week in and week out? Because when they do that, they are just unstoppable. But we just haven't seen it this year. And I know we talk about time and time again, we're not the biggest Kevin Walters fans, so we think there might be some issues there. But yeah, like if they can bottle that up and get that happening every week, the sky's the limit.
Seems crazy to me. Like he did his best GI impression today and looked unstoppable. Then you look around the SuperCoach landscape, Brian, and there's a lot of guys there that average, mid high 60s, maybe low 70s. And I think on talent alone, Katoni's all over it, but he's just never going to be in that echelon for fantasy purposes for some reason. He just doesn't really translate there. He's one of the players that I guess is just a bit of a mystery. Anyway, enough about Katoni and the mystery of all that, why he doesn't score a million fantasy football points. We're going to talk Dragons Bulldogs here. A few interesting names out of this one. So Connor Tracey with a hand injury, Reid Marnie with shoulder concern. Moses Suli looks like a MCL, hopefully not ACL type mechanism there where he got folded over in a tackle. Then Hame Sele was taken to hospital with maybe an abnormal heart rhythm, Brian, I think is what's been reported initially.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't change. I did the run sheet up today before we got the update from the Dragons. So it was reported from the ground as an irregular heartbeat last night, but they're just saying today, this afternoon, they gave an update. It was shortness of breath and chest pains. They said that he had a pretty nasty viral illness 3 weeks ago that they think this is connected to. I mean, or flu-like illness, I think they said. So yeah, I think the cookers in my comments, this kind of probably killed them a little bit, because when I put out the thing about the irregular heartbeat, oh man, it was I mean, I love it because it allows me to fill up my block list, and just kind of get rid of that stuff from my thing. And once again, not to get too political in and around it, but I'm not necessarily going hard at people who don't like vaccines or whatever. It's just people who, I guess, attribute everything to the vaccine before it's even happened. And here we've got, oh yeah, like it's a viral thing. It's something that he had 3 weeks ago, that they've made a, direct connection to, and potentially it could be COVID, and it's worth then, exploring that and reporting on it and all that kind of thing. But yeah, that's the thing that frustrates me the most, is just everything becomes that. Like, guys can't have medical issues without it going back to that. So I'll try not to lose too many of our listeners and go on about that kind of stuff.
I won't lose sleep, Brian, if we lose a few, to be fair. It's not the end of the world. We'll survive.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we'll be okay. Moses Suli with the knee. Look, they said it was hopeful it was MCL, but you correctly pointed out on Twitter that it had very close, close elements to that Tino Fa'asuamaleaui injury from earlier in the year, which was an ACL. Look, on looking at it, I was hopeful that it was more kind of that medial force as opposed to that anteromedial force, so sort of forcing the knee forward as well. So hopefully it is just that MCL injury, and they let him stay on after doing I assume some form of testing there. So you would hope they haven't missed an ACL. So MCL, the Flano said post-match they're thinking minor to moderate grade effectively. So, yeah, up to a month without Moses Suli there. Reid Mahoney with his shoulder, it's something that he has been dealing with, playing through, and it just apparently got too much for him in this game. So they took him off. So something that he'll have to continue to manage, and potentially, he could be. It makes me, from a Bundy Mixer standpoint, like I'm probably not going to consider him in the coming weeks, purely because he's at risk of requiring an early shower, and I think they've got the Finns this week, so potentially they could run up a score there, and then you just Reid Mahoney gets an early shower about the 55, 60-minute mark. So, yeah, something to keep an eye on with Reid Mahoney there. And then Connor Tracey with the hand, he showed no signs of it during the game in terms of didn't go off or anything like that. But Stephen Crichton mentioned post-game that he might have been playing with a broken hand. Whether that's something that Stephen Crichton's just put a whole bunch of mayo on it and is saying it just to try and talk him up. But yeah, I mean, if it's a broken hand, he'd be looking at least 2 to 3 weeks out. So something to keep an eye on. I'll be, I won't be, but hopefully someone will send me, if Gus tweets about it, send me a screenshot and let me know what the diagnosis is.
Yeah, we need Gus Gould in on this ASAP is what we need for the updates. Next game, Brian, was Finns v Warriors. Again, another wild-old game of footy and one of the most elite field goals you've ever seen to wrap that one up. But the only injury concern we're going to talk about here is SJ, who was ruled out pre-game with a quad injury. Really sad that, he wasn't here for his final swan song game in Brisbane, I guess, as it stands, isn't it?
Mate, you are talking to one sad man that I didn't get to see SJ run around. We spoke about last week where I was going to let my daughter decide whether we went to the Finns game or the women's, the Broncos Titans women's game today. And she decided halfway through the week it was definitely going to be the women's game. It was going to be Titans, Titans Bronx. And then SJ announced his retirement. And I was planning on doing some really, really bad parenting and like reverse psychologying my daughter to somehow get her to the Finns game, because I'm like, there's no way I'm missing SJ run around for his last game in Queensland. It's just not going to happen. So I was gonna be bad and try and tell her that there was going to be free chocolate at the the Finns game or something like that, just to get her there. But exactly. But it didn't end up happening. SJ was out, so we did go to the Titans Bronx in the women's today. Saw the Bronx put up a nice score. But yes, SJ with the quad. Warriors usually have a really good injury report every Tuesday, so that'll be something, I guess, that we'll watch out for. They haven't said, but I would assume it's minor because he picked it up last week but finished the game, and then he wasn't on the injury report, that good injury report that they do last Tuesday either. So the fact that he played out the game, he wasn't on the injury report, I would say it's just a minor niggle, and they want him to be okay for those final games, especially in NZ. It's like, let's not risk him for this one. Let's get him right for those, give him the send-off he deserves.
Yeah, nice one, mate. I think on the SJ side of things, has there ever been a better player with a better highlights package than SJ? Like, I really feel that he was unfairly maligned there for so many years, but if he was wearing your team's jersey year in, year out, he would have been one of the greats, I believe. I think he's been really overlooked for such a long period of time, and he's going to be a huge loss to the game and a huge loss for the Warriors, in my opinion, because he was huge for their brand and he's huge for what they did. In 2023 last year, sort of bringing them back into relevance there, and that's sort of carried over into this year. So real shame to see SJ go, and I guess thanks for the awesome memories is what I'll say, because God, there's been many. There's been so many good ones. Knights v Tigers was next, Brian.
We'll just 2 seconds, because we've rolled through. Yeah. We're rolling through the injuries pretty quickly, so
yeah,
I feel like we can just stop for a second. Let's, we could go for an hour if we wanted to, but I'm totally there with you. Like, my official eulogy to SJ on the Magic Sponge Pod. We'll probably do it again in round 26 when he actually plays his last game. But SJ for me, I think, especially in those like 2010s, we're just finishing uni, moving out into like share houses and that kind of thing. And share houses full of blokes. We're sitting in on Saturday afternoon watching Super Saturday from start to finish, then going out to the pub that night. Like those memories of sitting around just loving the Warriors and loving Vossi on the call, or like Vossi on the call, but also every now and then when it was like those super bias New Zealand, when they got the New
Yeah, the
Zealand
best.
feed in, like,
Yeah.
and it was just, it was so good. And SJ was so good, man. Like it's probably an underlying, an underappreciated one, but when he fractured his lower leg, that kind of, like, he still was such a good player. But before he did that, he was just bonkers. And I always bring up that try. I remember getting up to watch early in the morning, watch that World Cup semi-final where he scored that try around, I think it was George Burgess or Sam Burgess and those kind of guys. And just like last 2 minutes, they rushed up on him, Kevin Sinfield, and just left him for absolute dead, stepped another. And he was just, I cannot speak highly enough about him and just the vibes. Like, he was a good player. Yeah, okay, he had his, like he had the Achilles and that kind of brought him back to the pack, and he wasn't, a Cameron Smith or a Jonathan Thurston or anything like that. But just for excitement wise, I could not think of anyone better to sit down and watch. And just some of those memories, I think, looking back and seeing some of the tries that he scored, it reminded me a lot. The other player who I liked a lot like that was Matty Bowen. I feel like watching Mango go around, like they were two guys who, yeah, they might not have been the best defensive players ever, but just for pure attack. And when you had a good commentator on the call and getting up and about for it, yeah, it was just the best.
Nothing better, Brian. I couldn't agree with you more. Next game we're going to talk to then is the Knights versus Tigers. So out of this one, Aidan Sezer with a knee injury, and Dill Lucas was ruled out pre-game with a hamstring injury there, which threw my draft team into a bit of disarray there, Brian. Any updates about those two players?
Yeah, Dylan Lucas, I apologise to anyone who follows me on socials. That's just one I totally missed this weekend with a few things going on. So hamstring injury, apparently minor. They hopefully only miss a week, but potentially two. So we know what hamstrings are like. So we'll see how that goes. Aidan Sezer with the knee. It looked like knee-on-knee contact. Benji said post-match they were pretty hopeful that it was just bone bruising and nothing structural. So I would assume, Max he'd need to miss a week, but I even doubt he'll be out for that.
Very good. We'll wrap up the NRLW as we're going here, Brian. So we've got 4 knee injuries to talk through here. Kezie Apps, Harmony Crichton, Jess Sergis, and Caitlan Johnston Green. Do you want to talk knee detail for them in any, I guess, more depth?
Yeah, I think, like, obviously, well, I had Kezie Apps in the mixer this week, so that was a bit of a killer. She went knee straight into turf, I believe. It's hard to get info on the NRLW injuries, unfortunately, in terms of like post-match, any indication from the clubs, those kind of things. So, yeah, not much to go off here, unfortunately. So, PCL injury, even if she's named to play next week, if it's a minor sprain, you worry about performance-wise. So she's another one who, in something as selective as the mixer, I'd rather pick somebody who probably doesn't have that hanging overhead, but she could very well miss 4 to 6 weeks, if it's a more significant PCL injury. Harmony Crichton, it looked non-contact in nature, but it wasn't super obvious. So wait to hear back on that. Jess Sergis with her knee, I just put that in there because it looked like a pretty violent mechanism. Like, she had a contact mechanism, had that medial collapse, very similar to like a Moses Suli type kind of injury. Funnily enough, she then went and scored the next touch. But the reason I put it in there, she finished out the game. But I've said it once, I'll say it again. MCLs are becoming the new syndesmosis injuries, where players will play out the game and then it comes out later that it's something more significant. So I'm not fully... Yeah, like, I don't think Jess Sergis is out of the woods in my mind just yet. Caitlan Johnston Green out for the season with a knee injury, which is huge for the Knights. Like, she is such a, like a powerful forward for them. Suffered a knee injury at training during the week, which is just, that's so unlucky. And then, thoughts go out to Jamilee Bright. I was watching the game as I was doing my final prep, and she copped, and I never liked, the axial load neck injury. So axial load sounds like really sounds really complex or sounds, not clear for a lot of people. So effectively axial means straight down. So she got head down and her head hit directly on the hip of a player. So it kind of compresses the spine. We probably the one that people, will look to is like the Alex McKinnon one in terms of like his was more a hyperflexion injury. So chin to chest and then force put on the back. But I'm never a massive fan of those axial load ones straight down on the head. She did seem to be moving all her extremities before she was going off. So hopefully it's just precautionary. But yeah, just wanted to send my thoughts out to her and her friends and family. Hopefully we get news that she's okay.
Yeah, crossing everything there, Brien, that we get good news for Jamilee Bright. We're going to go straight into the Patreon questions now, Brien. So like we always say on the show, patreon.com/NRL Physio. If you want these questions answered every week, we've got a fair few to get through tonight, Brien. We've got our work cut out for us this evening. So question 1 is about Payne Haas and Ezra Mam. Is there any chance in them coming back this season to play, do you think?
Yeah, mate, the reporting on this has been a bit all over the shop. I think the Daily Tally kind of came out pretty early and said Haas was going to need surgery in 3 to 5 months out, which is pretty standard. Then the Broncos came out later in the week. They said he was reviewing with a surgeon. They've come out later in the week, and like Kevy, he's a bit all over the shop with his wording of things, but effectively said he's like likely to return this season was effectively the way he put it. And usually if you're going to review with a specialist, you are talking about at least a moderate grade injury, grade 2 injury, a partial tear, because if it's a minor sprain, you're not going to need to review with a specialist, or you're very rarely going to need to, because you're going to be like, yeah, it's only minor. We can look after this. We don't need to go. But usually if you're going to visit a specialist, it's because does this injury need surgery or not? Is the damage, it's kind of, in the mid ground, is it enough? So that's usually at least 3 to 4 weeks on the sideline, as we've seen with Latrell Mitchell. So yeah, I don't know. Like obviously they had a good win over the weekend, and they're still mathematically in the hunt. We love that mathematical equation for Haas. But yeah, I unless they go on a 3-game winning streak, I just don't see the upside in playing him this year. Yeah, for Liz Frank, for something that can definitely affect performance moving forward, it's just not something I would see them taking a risk with. The question is he any hope? He definitely is some hope from what's come out, but I just think it's highly unlikely. And Ezra Mam, I mean, if you had to ask me even at the start of this year, I would have said no, because the best we've had is a 5-week return, which would have put him at round 27. And once again, why risk him for round 27? But Tristan Sailor, the Bronx brought Tristan Sailor back in 4 weeks this season from a syndesmosis tightrope repair. So, potentially they're bringing him back for round 26 and 27. But once again, like upside wise, I mean, the Bronx, I'd love the Bronx to prove me wrong here and go on a massive winning streak and still be in finals contention. But yeah, I just don't know if it'll happen. As a Bronx fan, mate, are you counting on either of these guys being back?
No, not counting on them at all, Brien. I completely agree with your sentiments of, it'd be nice if they went on a tear, but I can't really see it eventuating either. I think the most likely scenario is it's season done for Payne and Ezra Mam from what we've heard so far. Second question, Brian's about Jake Granville. It sounds like he was, there was a story about him doing some rowing with a torn pec, and there's a comment of like how tough he was with that. Do you know much about that story and sort of what entailed there? We can put a bit of mayo on this for Jake as well, because he's been an absolute stalwart for the Cowboys. He was with the Bronx and Wynnum before that as well.
Yeah, so the story, if you missed it on social media, I think Todd Payton came out and said that Jake, suffered a pec injury in one of the first tackles of the week before, stayed out till halftime, was going to go back on if the medical staff didn't stop him, then was at training, has turned up late or something like that, and their punishment is to row 5 kilometres in front of all the rest of the boys. So Jake Granville, pec injury or not, just said, no, I'm going to do it anyway. So whether there's some mayo there, but if there's one guy who it wouldn't surprise me if there's no mayo, it's Jake Granville, because that guy is just, crazy tough. He probably, if there's 5 nominations for our Golden Sponge Awards, the toughest effort of the season, he's probably got 2 or 3 of them. come the end of the season. So yeah, I had a lot of people asking, like, is it possible? Yeah, like, of course it's possible. It's just how smart it is, or how much pain he would have been in. Yeah, I mean, props to him. He's like, as Todd Payton says, as crazy as these efforts sound, it does. I think it breeds good, good toughness and good culture, because even with a seeded row, he's not really risking too much, I wouldn't think, long term.
No, I agree with you, Brian. I just think if it was me, because I'm super lazy, I would have just heard the punishment and been like, you know what, boys, I'm retiring this year anyway. I'm just going to skip this punishment and dog you all. So that speaks more volumes about me rather than Jake, who signs like a top bloke, compared to myself, who's clearly a very shit bloke. So that's probably a good summary to wrap that up there. Next question, Brian's about Carl Oluwapu from the Bulldogs. So Carl had the neck fusion surgery. God, when did he have that? You might be able to fill in the details there a little bit, but probably worth noting that, you know, Carl's only turning 20 next year, highly touted, debuted last year and performed exceptionally well. Just for the people listening who might not be across his situation, do you want to give us a bit of an update on his situation and what that might look like moving forward in terms of return to rugby league?
Yeah, late last year, I think it was November or December, he had what we think is a fusion, cervical fusion. They did say they put a cage in there. So that means there is some sort of fusion in there, whether they did a disc replacement. There's a lot of different kind of things. And I think we spoke about it on a pod last year. There's probably a video. I think I put a video up on socials of us talking about it last season too. So if you want to go check that out. But in terms of, so he got the good news this week that he's been cleared for a return to training. So I assume that is started, because he's been doing running since March. So what are we now? August. So that's the last 4 or 5 months. He's been doing a lot of running stuff. So now you would assume he's getting into modified and full contact. I think a realistic return is to start a next season, get a full off season in, build it up. But yeah, I think the hardest thing here, which is exactly what we spoke about when it first happened, is he's just so young for a surgery like this. I mean, I just can't remember seeing that many of them. Talking to a few surgeons around when it happened, it's just not a common thing to occur. There's even you and I were talking about this week, the photo that was put up was a scan of his neck, and even looking at the scan, it looked like there was something like a bit different with the surgical implant. It wasn't something that you or I looked at and said, "Oh yeah, we know what that is." So I think because and it's mainly around skeletal maturity, like he hasn't reached full skeletal maturity yet. So yeah, it's definitely a bit up in the air in terms of how it's going to affect him into the future. But I think unless there's any major issues, like in the short term, I think round one or trials next year is a good aim for him. Is that kind of where you're sitting with it too, mate?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be a fairly good aim for early rounds next year. I suppose with the Bulldogs, with the position he's playing, he's not going to get a start at 6 with Burton there. And he played a little bit of 13 as well. And the Bulldogs are relatively well stocked in those, those 13 small forward rotation, I guess, elements. So it might be one where he sort of builds up a little bit through cup. So he might not be on the radar for, I guess, fantasy purposes next year. Like, I think if he was a starter at 13, my God, he looks so good at age 18 that he'd almost be someone you have to consider. I just wonder if he will get eased in very, very slowly, just given his age, given that he's under contract there for a couple more years, I think, as well, because he got signed for a fairly long-term deal last year when the Broncos stuff blew up. I don't know what happened there with the Bronx, but because he's a Brisbane boy, I believe. I think he went through school through Wavell. So yeah, probably a watch and wait. I hope he goes well though. Obviously, anyone that can wear maroon for us, Brian, we want to do well and do well for their clubs, because that's good for us come the 3 games in the middle of the year. Next question is about the recent AFL insurance decision. So Zurich is a big insurer that cover the AFL, and it looks like they are excluding insurance claims based on concussion grounds. So I guess the question here from Patreon is, will that decision have an impact on NRL or maybe even grassroots rugby league? God, it's a bit above my pay grade, this sort of stuff, Brian, when you talk about insurers and legislation and the impacts for NRL and grassroots. What do you think, though? Do you have any sort of opinions on this one?
Yeah, mate, I might start talking about this, and there'll be someone who works in insurance and litigation and those kind of things who will hear what I'm about to say and think it's an absolute joke. So I apologize in advance because it's not really my area of expertise. Look, like I think most insurance companies have the reputation of being, money hungry and not looking after. And I mean, I work in an industry where I deal with health insurance companies all the time, and I can say that a lot of them are pretty shitty towards their clients and their patients and their people that they cover. I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of them. At the end of the day, they're trying to, worry about their share price a lot of the time. The thing here is that it's a bit like, and I did see a good example from someone. It's like if you have a house next to the river, you're really going to struggle to get it, insured for flood cover. And it's sort of kind of becoming a similar sort of thing here. Is that it's hard to, yeah, like especially the way that we're seeing and the effect that we're seeing concussion have. It's gonna be an easy one for insurers to just be like, no, we're not going to cover it, because I think the litigations are only going to get, more and more as time goes on, and the more we learn about it, the effect that it has, and once we start getting ways that players can have scans, before they pass away, in terms of like diagnosing CTE and these kind of things, there's just going to be so much more opportunity for people to be alive and well and be like, yeah, I was mistreated, and this is the way I want to go. Look, I've been on record as saying that I think in 50, 100 years, I just don't think contact sport is going to be anything of what it is right now. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think a lot of people hear that. But if you go back 50 years or go back 100 years and you think about, like, the game's not much more than 100 years old, right? But you think about what it used to be like, and we see these videos of guys getting like dropped on their heads, and, like there was just nothing there in terms of like player safety and that sort of things. Yeah, like in 50 years, we've got the growth of esports, and and the question here is like, what is the effect? I just think it's just a sign that it's going to be so hard as time goes forward to get participation in junior footy. I know there are, like, there are people who are listening who'll be like, oh, it's a tough game. It's only for tough people. People got to be tough. And I'm like, yeah, that's all well and good. But if as a society, we're leaning away from that old school toughness, like that is, with the newer generations coming through, people are not valuing that as highly, then there's just not going to be those guys coming through and becoming, and guys and girls becoming NRL and NRLW players moving forward. I think we've got to find ways. It's not that we want to get to touch football. That's definitely not what we want. But this is where, things like getting these blood tests, these saliva tests, those kind of things in to try and make the game as safe as possible around concussion. It's got to happen, because I think the effect is going to be that less people are going to play. I see it in my job day in and day out, talking to kids who are fans of footy but don't play. Like, there is and that's subjective. I'm not about to say that I've, polled a whole bunch of people or something like that. But I talk to a lot of kids who are massive fans of footy, but they either just they play touch or they don't play at all, and they just love their footy. That's what they do. And that's all well and good, and that's fine. But if that kind of continues to grow, then you're not going to have, you're just not going to have those pathways. You're just not going to have the pure numbers of people to come through. So, yeah, I think it shines a light on the games just needing to do absolutely everything that they can. Like, they cannot take away contact. That's not what I'm suggesting. But more, I think it's around the management and identification of concussions, so that we're potentially, it might get to a point where if you have a concussion, you have a month off footy. That, like, I know that sounds absolutely horrific for people to hear, and they'll probably be like, you're kidding. but it's probably going to be there at some point. I think it's probably going to be there some point in our lifetime, I reckon. As more study happens and we get more objective data around it, I think that'll happen at some point. So if you can't wrap your head around it, I think you probably have to at some point, because I think it's coming. Does that sound about right, James? What are your thoughts on the insurance side of things?
A few things that just spring to mind here, Brian. I think one of the big things that people need to be aware of as well with like concussion and CTE, getting that diagnosis obviously post-mortem, but then if you're getting that diagnosis, there's a whole range of other factors apart from concussion that can contribute to that. So I guess the big ones that we would have seen historically would have been smashing the piss, so just belting the beers, and then also smoking the house down, illicit drugs, those type of things all are a factor with things, unhealthy lifestyle, comorbidities after the fact, after you finish your playing career too. So all those things can have an impact on brain health. Your genetics has an impact on brain health. There are some people that have a genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's changes or potential things that can masquerade like CTE. So I think one of the really challenging things when you're talking about like repeat concussion, what impact it has on you short, medium, and long term, it's really hard to split it up with all those other lifestyle factors as well, which can confound things. So maybe insurance companies are just like, it's just too easy for them just to exclude it based on pre-existing things or lifestyle things or whatever that might be. So that's sort of a bit of an unknown to me just from the outside looking in. I think on the participation level side of things, Brian, it is a good point because there are other options. I think there's the sports that are growing, to my understanding as well as purely anecdotal, would be, I think basketball and soccer have grown significantly in participation numbers for obvious reasons there without contact, because we do have more parents of kids that aren't inclined for them to partake in contact sports. And that's all well and good. That's everyone's choice. I think there's still going to be a demand for football participation while you've got the elite pathway the way it is, particularly from kids that come from socioeconomic disadvantage that can see, wow, I could like make NRL and I could really do something significant for myself and my family financially. I think you see that in like, particularly American sports too, where, we know the risk of NFL. We know that it takes years of people's life expectancy, but you've still got a huge player pool, a huge college pool of players to draw from there that aren't getting turned away. And I guess to that point, there are a lot of people, men especially, that are, fairly willing to go into high risk vocations and high risk occupations. I guess, some people would say, well, if I wasn't a rugby league player, I would have been signing up for, the defence forces maybe, which again is a high risk position. So it sort of comes with a grain of salt, I think, those things, doesn't it? It's a huge discussion point. I guess we could talk about it for a long period of time there. Was there any other thing you wanted to add on top of that, Brian? Or any other things you wanted to expand on that I've just chimed in with?
No, mate, I think you've nailed it. I think that's we've definitely presented both sides of the coin there well, I think.
Rightio, next one is for the Broncos particularly. So do you reckon Adam Reynolds is carrying an injury? He sort of seemed a little bit off his game recently, or could it just be a bit of soreness? And then an update on Reece Walsh as well. I didn't notice anything with Reece at the present, Brian. Like, any other things that you've heard about Reece Walsh there? I thought he was bumped and bruised through Origin, but I thought he looked all right the other night.
Yeah, no, he just had he laid on a pass, and his hand got jammed up, and sort of they were thinking on the commentary it was a fractured hand at one point, because he was hand or wrist was really grasping at it and seemed in quite a lot of pain. I kind of took the fact that he went off at halftime and came back out, that they were pretty happy with it, because I doubt they'd send him back out there with concerns of a fracture as much as their season is on the line. They had Tristan Saylor on the bench, so, it would have been an easy one to kind of swap him around. So there hasn't been a specific update, but I think you can take it, the fact, A, that he went back on, and B, we're at Sunday night now. If he'd had a fracture, a fractured hand or wrist for Reece Walsh you would assume, isn't getting beyond 24 hours staying hush-hush with the way. Although, in saying that, there are a lot of journos over in Paris at the moment, so potentially, there might be less guys sort of on the grind to try and find this stuff. But yeah, in terms of Adam Reynolds, I haven't heard anything. I think he might just be getting back into the swing of things after having 3 months off. You didn't see anything with Reynolds either?
No, not really. I can't think of anything else additionally that might be related to Yeah, not too sure, mate. Nothing else I think I want to add to the mix there. Like, the Broncos are going to be trotting these guys out if they've got a heartbeat and they're not having something that they seriously need rest from. So I think we just got to hope and pray that they get hot and stay hot through to all the finals. Next question was about Jai Gray. Interested in whether you thought Jai Gray's injury was minor. That was a rib injury. There was some talk about maybe it was fracture, but he did play through it. And then did he pass his HIA as well, as the question here from Adrian Bryan? So a couple of aspects to hit on here with the rib fracture, was it, wasn't it? And then the HIA.
Yeah, so I think with the rib injury, in terms of him playing through it, like whether it's fractured or not, rib injuries are just known as super painful injuries. So it doesn't, I think whether there's a fracture or not doesn't kind of, isn't based on the pain, because some of the most painful rib injuries have no fracture there. So I wouldn't assume that there is no fracture there just because he did play through it, is what I would say. But if they do discover a fracture, they usually need to give it a couple of weeks just to allow some bone healing to occur, because there are added risks if you fracture it further. You can have, lacerations of your internal organs and those kind of things. Whereas just with an irritation or a popped rib cartilage, they like to say a lot of the time, it's just pain management. So yeah, look, usually you return to plays in that 1 to 3 week range. So he still has a chance to play next week. It's going to be more sore after it cools down over the next couple of days. But then later in the week, as he'll probably get some painkillers into it and those kind of things. I'd still back him to play. In terms of did he pass his HIA, look, this is one of those things. It was in the final 15 minutes. We just so rarely get any update on that. Like even the journos rarely ask, which kind of is a bugbear of mine. They don't tend to ask about those HIAs in the final 15. And even if they do, the coaches usually straight bat it. So that's probably why they don't ask, to be honest. But yeah, no, unfortunately, no news on that front.
Next question, Brian's an interesting one. It's about Luke Garner. Is he currently injured because he wasn't named for NRL or Cup this week? So the Panthers have got a few injuries in their back row. Have we got any update on Luke Garner, or what might be the Panthers' back row for the next week? That's going to be an interesting one for particularly drafters.
Yeah, mate. Luke Garner, I'm pretty sure was a hamstring injury, but I know there was an update on the Panthers website last week where they were saying he's aiming for finals. So I think it'll be, he's not going to be back next week from what their injury report said. They also said that Dylan Edwards was due back in round 24 or 25, which would be good for a few of my draft comps. But yeah, so it doesn't sound like Garner will be an option. I think more if you're looking at who's going to be in there. I think Maverick Geyer will be the one, who probably might be due for big minutes there, which, that'll be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, I think did Liam Henry play a little bit there earlier in the year
Yes.
as well? Did he get a bit of edge time too? Yeah, I guess Liam Henry would be the one to look at there, Brian. I was really keen on Alamotti getting onto an edge. I think Paul Alamotti could play edge, but he's obviously missing for quite a few weeks with the upper limb fracture there. All right, we're nearly finished here, Brian, but round 24, round 26 is the draft finals in SuperCoach. With Scotty Sorensen's injury, with his hamstring injury, do you drop him out of your team?
Oh, boy. No backup second row forward either, this question says. Oh, man, that's a tough one. I think if you are really confident that you make the final in round 26, I think you hold, because I think he's a chance for round 26. 25 is theoretically a chance, but I just don't see the Panthers rushing him really. So, yeah, I think like a lot of people, usually the way I structure my benches from a draft perspective is I like to have like high upside guys who aren't playing in like 2 to 3 of my spots, so I can potentially pull an auto emergency flick. So like I look as Sorensen, like I'm not looking for like depth, like a guy who's gonna score me 45 points and I'm holding him on my bench. Like I'm not doing that. Like I'm not, getting Elliot Whitehead on my bench, for example, just because I'm holding Scott Sorensen in the hope that he comes back in round 26 and I can start him and he'll get big minutes. So I would say it depends on you. If you're playing next week and you need a spot, I think you absolutely drop him because I think he'll be out for at least the next 2 weeks is what I've got in my head. Mate, as a draft aficionado, what are your thoughts?
I would probably hold. I think you got round 26 versus the Bunnies. That could be absolutely a points bonanza. It just depends on all your other injuries you got to nurse at the time and what your bench is like and what's around on waivers. My inkling would be hold if you possibly can and drop other people or other players who are less likely than Scotty Sorensen would be the way I construct it. Like you last, Brian, on that similar sort of vein there's a few people in the casualty ward. Is there anyone that you're eyeing off for the fantasy finals? So we're talking around 24, 25, 26 people who could make a bit of a difference here as we approach the draft finals for Supercoach.
Yeah, mate, the one who I'm holding in a lot of leagues is Suafalongo. I think that's a pretty obvious one, but it's worth mentioning. He is on the free agency in one of my draft leagues, and I just can't find a spot for him. I've got a pretty chockers bench. So, but yeah, he's the obvious one. I think with Paps and his foot and the Storm in a good kind of spot, he is someone who could definitely get a game at fullback over the next month or so, which would be huge. Look, like I'll throw to you in a second with some injury ones, but just from a resting standpoint, I think Brad Schneider, like a Nat Butcher, Siwa Wong, Panthers, Roosters potentially could have some restings there. You got to remember with Schneider, he was so good earlier in the year because he was goal kicking as well. But then Paul Alamotti took it off him. But see, Alamotti's got that fracture now, so he won't be back. So if Schneider comes in and supplements for a Cleary, he'll be goal kicking more than likely too, which would just be gold. So I don't mind those 3 or 4 guys as some options. You've got a couple of tasty injury ones, which I reckon could be good dart throws as well.
Yeah, these ones are the first two are really dicey because I'm not very confident in these two, but I thought for the sake of the question, if you got a chance to roster these guys, it may well be worth doing it. So Max King is one from the Bulldogs and Jeremy Marshall King as well from the Finns. Their timeframes around returning from, I guess, JMK was foot and Max King was the wrist hand. I think Max King has been on record on podcast saying like maybe 26, maybe 27. Jeremy Marshall King was injured round 18. So he would be probably like a 25, 26 at best return. I don't know. I think they're not great, but I think they sort of fit the profile here for the round 24, 26. The other two that I thought may have got, dropped Micah Sivo may not be rostered. He's been out for a hamstring for quite some time. He's due to return round 25. The Eels left wing's always been a fairly productive fantasy position for scoring, and the Eels don't look dead and buried. Weirdly, I thought they would be horrendous by this time of the year, but they're putting up a bit of a fight. They're Paris, so he might not be the worst shout in the world just to stash on your bench. And the other one, which I don't think he's on the SuperCoach app yet, is Mark Nwangdawase from Rugby Union, who's coming to the Roosters. So I don't know if he's back from Paris yet because he was there for Rugby Sevens. He might be living it up in the athletes' village. They're having a pretty good time. Old Marky Mark, he'd probably do some damage over there. I reckon he's an absolute rooster. Eddie is a Sydney Rooster as well to come. So I think if you can see him on the SuperCoach app, I would probably sneakily pick him up because the Roosters outside backs, they have been a little bit skint there, and I think he's one that might be able to jag a few points in a few minutes. And I guess with the style of game he has, he might not get you huge kick return things, but the Roosters are just the team that you need to have, the back 4 positions because they can score a lot of points very quickly there. So he'd be the only other one that's a bit of a smoky, Brian. What do you reckon about them?
Like it, mate. On the Marky Mark chat, there I had a few questions during the week about Junior Ponga. Potentially you like picking him up because Dom Young, no certainty. Well, not no certainty, but I guess no certainty to come back next week. But he's also dealing with a PCL injury of his own. He got suspended, then had a PCL injury. So, yeah, the Roosters outside backs are all over the shop. In reality, I think Billy Smith, far out, poor, unlucky Billy Smith, a lateral ankle sprain with cartilage, and he's been out for pretty much the entire season. Just ridiculous, the poor bugger. So, yeah, like if you can get a read on a Roosters outside back there's potentially some good scores to come from a few of those guys. Absolutely. Mate, let's move forward from draft to classic. I couldn't have been more excited for you. I lived vicariously through you this week in the trade terms because you sent me a screenshot where you could trade out 2 guys and bring in 2 guys, and they were the 2 guys who we agreed last week were just the guys that you needed to bring in, and then they both scored like 120 plus, and it was fantastic. You've scored well. I'm very happy. I scored pretty well too, so I'm not too sad, but I did score less than you, so I'm the worst bloke this week. But hit me with what you did, how you did it, and what your plans are moving forward.
So I did send that screenshot to you not long after lockout, Brien, because I was thinking, geez, I really need to make this money work. And fortunately for me, like I said on the pod last week, it was Ponga and Turbo in, and I was able to trade out Isaac Tungo and Ronaldo Militalo. So Aussie Tungo scored 2 tries. I don't really care about that. He's someone I just do not want to roster in my team for any longer. If I don't need to, I'm happy to be rid of that headache because he was never going to start for me or be reserved in my setup. So I was happy to see him go for a Ponga Turbo situation. Seeing them go deluxe this week was obviously a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed that. I think I only had 14 grand to spare. So I just got those two trades through by the skin of my teeth. So happy days from that respect. But now I've got no more trades, Brien. So I'm going raw till the end of the year. I'm just raw dogging SuperCoach for the last few rounds. I think this round looks okay. So it should be okay for next round. So I really got to just get through, what's that, 25, 26, 27. So 3 rounds after that and see what it looks like without any trades. So it's going to be a hairy old ride to the end of the year. And, a week is a long time, as the rugby league vernacular tells us. But the good thing about this week was, 12.92 was my score. I captained Ponga, so did well there. I only had 3 Roosters on the bye, so I would have locked a few more points because I see a lot of people have got Watson, Crichton, Dom Young, Teddy. I only have Sam Walker, Terrell May, and Dom Young. So I was like, I would have liked to get a little bit further ahead because once those teams get those Roosters boys back, they're going to start pumping out big scores. So I'm a little bit worried about that, about not having enough Roosters if I had trades left, Brien. So these will be the guys I'll be looking at. Zach Lomax, Val Holmes, Jesse Raymond, Greg Marzio, I think all in centre wing. I think they're all really good shouts. I think Lomax and Val are probably the tier above Raymond and Marzio, but Raymond's probably a really good point of difference. He's scoring so well for the Sharks this year, so consistently. But even if I had Teddy, I would be moving heaven and earth to get to Ponga and Turbo. I guess that's easy for me to say after the fact what I've done this week, but those 2 guys just have a ceiling that's hard to touch when they're going well. Even Caitlan with the kicking boots this week was hitting them pretty well. So that would be really good options, I think, moving forward. Guys on the cheap, I just thought chucking a few of these in. If you're looking for a downgrade somewhere or going from a 700k to a 500k, like Cam Murray, Paddy Carrigan, Billy Kickow, Taniela Paseka, and Nelson Asafa Solomona are guys that are pretty attractively priced, and they've always had historically good SuperCoach output in the past. So I think they're ones that if you can save a bit of money somewhere, like my thinking is if you can go Terrell May to down to one of those guys, you probably save, 250 grand or a Max King. I've still got Max King riding my pine. If I went Max King to Taniela Paseka, it saves me 270 grand. And then you can choose to upgrade that elsewhere. And then you got a starting player for the last 3 weeks, just in case you need it. You're probably not going to reserve him in your final 17, but it's just to give you a bit of cash and someone there just in case injuries strike out of the blue. So they're ones to look at. And even the Penrith second row forwards, I reckon that's going to be a sneaky one for the next few weeks, is who gets those edge minutes, who gets those spots. The Penrith Panthers always play guys 80 minutes on their edge. They're pretty consistently going to do that. I'm really keen to see what Team List Tuesday shows for those guys, especially from a draft point of view. One thing I wanted to add before I flick over to you here, Brien, for SuperCoach is, my God, Lockie Galvin's going good. We got to give Lockie Galvin a bit of rap here on the Magic Sponge because, he's a guy who's averaging way over 60 as a 5'8", as a rookie for the goddamn West Tigers. I mean, if that isn't overcoming all the odds stacked against you, I don't know what is. I was tossing up trading at him or Dylan Brown, and I thought, the Tigers have maybe a slightly better draw, and hopefully they score pretty similarly. But mate, Lockie Galvin has had such a good year in SuperCoach. It's hard to see any other people getting Rookie of the Year, even in NRL. He's been fantastic this year. West Tigers have got a good one. Hopefully they can keep him around for a long time because, God, he's been great for them this year. I think that flies under the radar a bit, doesn't it? We sort of appreciate him just from a SuperCoach point of view because he's the basement level dude we've had all year. But when you take a step back and look at it, you think, far out, this guy is elite. He's elite.
Mate, I have made some trades that have come off badly for me in the last 6 or 7 weeks, and the number one is which is just ridiculous to say, but Max Plath to Angus Crichton, right? Like, who would have thought that would have cost me so many points? But it has a lot of points. But Galvin to Cody Walker isn't far behind it. Like, I thought for sure. To be fair, I counted on Latrell being there and like Cody and Latrell doing their thing. But mate, I just thought there's no way Galvin can keep doing it. Like, what motivation do they have? The Tigers probably heading for the spoon. He's elite. He's killing it. He has that super coach game where he likes the ball in his hand. He likes taking on the line. He busts the line. He busts tackles. He puts in kicks. He's getting, forced dropouts, these kind of things. He is an excellent super coach player and an excellent real life player too. So, yeah, props to him. I'm right on the bandwagon there with you. It's really good to see. I scored 1252 this week. It wasn't looking like a good week until the Ponga captaincy for the last game. Shout out to Isaac Tungo, finally doing something. But yeah, if I had him, I'd be getting rid of him like you did. That is for sure. Well, if I had trades, sorry. If I had trades, I know it's regurgitating it, but yeah, Turbo Ponga. I just think, as much as I feel good about owning Teddy this week, heading into, I think they're playing the Eels potentially. I'd still rather have Turbo and Ponga. Like, Turbo at home against the Warriors this week, like, I'm just not going to even pay any attention to it and just tune in at the end and see the damage, because it could be, if you're not captaining him this week, then you are absolutely mental. Like, he could go 200 plus, I think. So, yeah, shout out to Turbo. I'm a coward who didn't bring in when I said I would. Next year, I'm just doing everything that I say on the pod, mate. Just don't think about it during the week. Just go off the gut on the pod, and it's got to be better. Got to be better. Mixer, hit me with what you did. You did better than me here too, you bugger.
Yeah, just by skin of my teeth here, Brian. So 405. Not great, not bad. I don't know what the score is going to be like in the Mixer this week. It's been a weird old scoring week for the Mixer, and then a weird old scoring NRLW because, like you said earlier, like, who's good, who's not good. It's really hard to get a read on the NRLW this year. There was a lot of upsets this week. So my team was Lauren Brown at hooker, Georgia Hale was boosted at the mid position. Keon on an edge scored me 25. I was like nearly vomited in my mouth when I saw that. Wasn't happy to see that. I had all the other options I could choose, and it was good, way better. But anyway, Keon Kolomatangi was in my team. Then I had Nath Cleary in the halves, like everyone else in the Mixer. Isabel Kelly at centres, and I boosted Callum Ponga. So I think Ponga just outscored Cleary by a little bit. I was hoping that would be a little bit more as a bit of a point of difference there. Moving forward, Brian. So I like the last 2 weeks, get this. So, like, week one, how I shat the bed pretty much was like Emma Manzelman only scored 15 points at 9 for the Cows. She's played back-to-back full games of footy at hooker, and I think she scored 45 and 49. So I have really, really fucked that up massively. So I am ready to get hurt again by Emma Manzelman. I'm probably going to pick her at 9. I think she's going to be a pretty safe and solid option there. If she's played in full quid of minutes, it does scare me a bit, but she's done it the last 2 weeks in a row. The Cowboys don't seem to rotate through there. I don't think that's the worst place to be. The Cowboys have been all right as well. I know I haven't got the results on the board here, but they've been going okay. The other one, Brian, that was so interesting to me, and you saw this game, so you could probably eyeball this for me, was Romy Teitzel from the Bronx on an edge. She kicked 6 out of 8 goals, played the full 70, but only scored 38 Mixer points. How does that happen? I was like, looking at the scores, looking at all the goals, and I was like, oh my god, Romy Teitzel might score 100 here, to the glory days of Corey Parker as a edge or a second row eligible goal kicker scoring 1 million points. But anyway, she didn't put up that many points in the mix. So I was a little bit surprised about that. She's probably one to watch though. She is goal kicking consistently. The Broncos aren't going to score that many tries week in, week out. And obviously Mele Hufanga, who I had week 1 and I went away from to the Roosters centres. I should have stuck fat with Mele Hufanga. I really should have stuck with. She, on her day, Brian, is the best watch in the W by a mile. I love what Mele Hufanga is about. Just tackle breaks, hard unders lines, but even just the fact of I'm just going to steamroll people. I just love the vibe that's just around Mele Hufanga. And she plays for the Bronx. So what was I doing? I've got to get back in the Bronx bandwagon. The other one who's a lead is Tegan Berry. I think at fullback. I think I had her in last week and she didn't score that well. I've just got to stick there. I think she's been really, really good with not many good options. So looking at the options for the men and the women this week, Brian. So for NRL players, I like probably the Manly and the Roosters players. I think they could probably got the pick of the matchups. In the NRLW, I don't really know what to do because the matchups all look pretty even to me. But I think Broncos at home, they're at East there at your neck of the woods. They've got Canberra coming up on a road trip. So Canberra's like not an awful matchup. Brisbane are at home. Can they go back to back with big games? I don't know. I don't know what's doing there with the Bronx, but I may well lean into that matchup just because I think it's an 11 a.m. game or 11:30 a.m. game on the Saturday. So hopefully good dry weather. Footy might get thrown around a little bit. It's in East Brisbane, God's country there, Brian, where you're based as well. Probably not going to be a bad place to be on a Saturday morning, I don't think. So that's probably my plans as it stands for next week, Brian. It's going to be an interesting one this week because there's not a lot of really plus matchups that you can cash in with for the NRL or the NRLW. So I think you can take a few risks this week to see where you land and see if you can chase some points back. How'd you go? Give us your scores and what your plans are.
Mate, I was a bad mixer this week because I missed Thursday night lockout. Halfway through the game, I went, oh, shit, and went to my app or went to the site and see if I had any of those Storm or Rabbits players because it randomly fills your team. I would have been screwed because I would have had, whoever, Michael Cheekham could have been in there. Thank God it wasn't anyone who played those games. So, but it Harry Grant and Damien Cook were the two hookers who I would have picked if I had done that before, and I had like my team kind of all planned out. But that kind of threw it in disarray. So I ended up going McInnes at hooker. Simon Taufa, Kezie Apps with the injury. I was the same as you. Second row edge killed me this week. Cleary, Sergis, and Ponga. Yeah, mate, like Melly Hufanga, watching her in person today, just mental. I will say about East, great place. But, man, if you've got a 3 and a 5-year-old, you want to try and find a seat at any point, it is very difficult, which is a commentary on we went to the same doubleheader this time last year and there were seats everywhere. And today, and it's been done up since then, last year, there was not a seat. Like, it was chockers. So I wouldn't be surprised if the crowd sizes are a bit bigger this year around the NRLW. I think the scheduling leaves a bit to be desired at times, which I've seen a few articles on, but there's definitely quite popular, which was good. Look, Tegan Berry keeps lighting up for next week, but she's got the Roosters, so I'm not super keen on that, especially over the likes. Like, I think you just have to go turbo at fullback. I just can't see how you don't go turbo, and I'd boost him because Cleary's got the Storm. So yeah, I'd be going turbo and boosting him 1000% at fullback. So that'll kind of dictate the rest of my team. I do like Kennedy Cherrington. She's playing 70 minutes time, like week in and week out at the moment, and scoring like mid to late 40s and into the 50s. She's a really good option. I think the Titans have got a few players coming back in the next week or two who might, potentially could cut in on Georgia Hale's minutes. So worth keeping an eye on there in terms of Georgia Hale. Keep an eye on the team lists and see how that bench shakes up for the Titans, especially after a big loss. They'll be looking to make some changes, I assume. But yeah, as you say, like NRLW wise, it's just so hard to get a handle on like who's good and who's bad. Like which is awesome because it just makes every game you go into it and you're not like predetermined this team's going to win. I'm not in an NRLW tipping comp, but I wish I was because it would be all over the shop at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking with the mix. I'm ranked about 98th. I've dropped about 40 or 50 spots in our league this week, which is disappointing. So it just means I've got to get back on the wagon, don't miss Thursday night lockout, and hopefully get back up into the top 50 and take it out by the end of the season is my aim, James. Mate, that's about it for this week. Have we missed anything? Anything you want to say on the mix or NLW? Or are you pretty happy?
No, we've covered a fair few bases tonight, Brian. I'm pretty good, I reckon. We can put a bow around it.
Awesome, guys. We've been here for a while. As always, if you like the pod, give us a review, recommend to a friend, head to patreon.com/NRL Physio if you want more information. But otherwise, up the mighty, mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.